Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of All Angles. I'm Dion Jackson. I'm in Kigali, in Rwanda, where the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting is taking place. And lots of issues being discussed at civil society fora all over the city. Issues to do with climate justice, issues to do with freedom of expression. And of course, one of the hot topics here, we're all waiting to hear who will be the Secretary General of the Commonwealth against the background of the fact that Jamaica's Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade Minister, Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith, is challenging the incumbent Baroness Scotland. Those and other issues in today's edition of the program. So stay tuned and make sure you tweet along with us. Our hashtag is TVJ All Angles. Joining me in studio, I have political analyst Dr. Nadine Spence, and on the line with us, we have columnist, former journalist and editor with the BBC, Orin Gordon. We also have with us Antiguan government spokesman, Ambassador Lionel Hurst, as well as Ambassador Guy Hewitt, former Bajan ambassador to the United Kingdom. And we thank you all so very much. It's great to have you all on. Let me start with you, Dr. Spence. First of all, is the Commonwealth, even as people say, a thing? Is the Commonwealth still important in this day and age, this grouping of 54 countries, most of whom are former colonies of Britain?
I think it's important because of the shared history, especially for those countries that had once been colonized by Great Britain. I think it's important for that. I think it's important because there's a commonality of experience that we share, and so a commonality of current realities that would see countries that have undergone this experience benefiting from, having a channel of communication open that allows them to speak about the impact of this particular experience on their current realities. I think for that reason it's important. I think Britain is important to be there because I imagine that sooner or later there is going to be that important conversation that Commonwealth states need to have with their former colonizer about the impact that has been persistent since independence, since the emancipation of the slave trade and slavery, that there is a reality that has not left Caribbean people, African people, Pacific people, that they still struggle with. For right now, I think the Commonwealth isn't, I think, doing what it can do to have Britain answer to those charges of the crimes committed against the people who live in the African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries, people who it stole from. So I'm hoping for the day when the Commonwealth will have those conversations in a very honest way. And for right now, it has the potential to do so, but it's not having the relevant conversations yet.
Okay, whole heap in there I want to come back to, but let me bring in Orin Gordon first. Orin Gordon, you've been covering the Commonwealth for years. How does it affect those of us in Jamaica and the rest of the Caribbean? Does it matter?
First of all, Dion, thanks for inviting me onto the program. Good afternoon to Dr. Spence and the distinguished ambassadors who's sharing this discussion. The Commonwealth matters and is relevant. It helps nations of the member nations with the kind of technical cooperation things that fly under the radar and frankly which we the journalists don't cover enough. Taking my own personal experience of the Commonwealth, besides covering the business of the Commonwealth since Edinburgh in 1997, I was asked to conduct training of journalists in Sierra Leone in 2008. And this is training journalists in business reporting and holding their governments to account for corrupt practices. That is one. And I was an observer to the general elections in Lesotho in 2012. So this is my personal experience. And the Commonwealth helps its member countries to deliver in areas of, to help the governments and NGOs deliver in areas of gender rights, firmer corruption laws, electoral support, and a whole host of other areas. the Commonwealth really does matter, but I think it does have to do a better job of conveying to the citizenry of the Commonwealth, the more than 2 billion citizens of the Commonwealth, the work that it does and how the work that it does is impacting the lives of the citizens of the Commonwealth. And I'm sure later on in the discussion, we'll come around to what Patricia Scotland has done in her 6 years in office. And one of the things that she has done, just jumping ahead slightly, is to bring about the sort of institutional reform that allows the rubber to meet the road in a more meaningful way for citizens.
All
But
right. Yeah, but
just to wrap
I'll ask you
up,
to hold that. I'll ask you to hold that because we are
yeah,
going to
yeah, yeah.
come to that as you
I'm
intimated.
jumping ahead
Yes.
slightly. Yeah.
Ambassador Hurst, for you, from the perspective of somebody in government who has seen the workings of the Commonwealth, tell us from your perspective the kind of impact it has for us in the Caribbean.
Well, thanks for inviting me, and thanks also to my colleagues who are on the line and sharing their views. First, let me point out that when Antigua and Barbuda became an independent country in 1981, the Commonwealth had already been established, and by 1983, our first encounter with the Commonwealth had to do with what the press called the invasion of Grenada. The Honorable Lester Bird was our deputy prime minister, but he represented Antigua and Barbuda at the Commonwealth. And so when we speak of the Commonwealth, it's really the experience of the Honorable Lester Bird on which we count in order to articulate for Antigua and Barbuda what exactly did the Commonwealth mean. I played a little role in completing the autobiography of the Honorable Lester Bird, and this was one of the subject areas which we examined during his more than, almost 50 years in the foreign affairs, the planning, the execution of Antigua and Barbuda's sovereignty. And I can tell you that for us, the Commonwealth was very important. Lester Bird also championed one of the most successful agenda items on the Commonwealth's list of items, and that's apartheid. No, we're not making the claim that he was responsible for the ending of apartheid, but he made sure that the Commonwealth played an important role in isolating South Africa from the other members of the Commonwealth that had an interest in ensuring that the racist ideology of South Africa could not and would not succeed in remaining intact by the time small states like ours had become independent and sovereign states. And of course, we look to the Commonwealth from time to time to help us with the kind of training to which the reporter made reference, Dr. Gordon made reference, scholarships and training. We have had quite a number of young people traverse the world at the expense of the Commonwealth, learning what there is to learn, and of course bringing it back to Antigua and helping us to govern our country much better. And we dare say that Antigua and Barbuda is very well governed, especially so under the current Prime Minister, the Honorable Gaston Brown, who is on his way to Kigali at this moment as we speak, with the expectation that he will be championing a number of causes that he believes the Commonwealth can help us to articulate and to make relevant to the other nation states that share the same platform.
Nadine, they asked you to look at the screen. Can I as well, though, bring in on that point, Ambassador Hewitt, because Ambassador Hewitt, you have the interesting perspective of having worked with several Secretaries General of the Commonwealth, but if I'm not mistaken, you also have suggested that at this point, leaving the Commonwealth for some of the Caribbean territories would be a positive development, would be a good idea. Can you help us a little bit in terms of where you are with your thinking on the Commonwealth?
Good evening, all, and thank you for inviting me, and let me thank my fellow panelists for their contributions. Just to correct that last remark, I have never advocated for anyone to leave the Commonwealth because I think it is an institution that has a lot of value and a lot of benefits to its member states. Just to give some context, so when we talk about the Commonwealth, Ambassador Hurst made an important point about what is probably the best known item of the Commonwealth was its work and its global campaign to end apartheid in South Africa. And that was probably its most momentous accomplishment, led by Sonny Ramphal from Guyana, and it really put the Commonwealth on the map as an organization that could influence global change. But for us in the Caribbean, there is another important element, which is that 32 of the 54 member states in the Commonwealth are small states. And it was the work of the Commonwealth, then led by a task force led by former Prime Minister Owen Arthur, who worked with the international financial institutions to put the issue of small states on the international agenda. So whenever there's a discussion about small states, it goes back to the Commonwealth in terms of its research done on vulnerability of small states, especially small island states. And so we in the Caribbean have we have been important beneficiaries of the Commonwealth's work in terms of giving us visibility. As I said, the majority of Commonwealth states are small states, so therefore we get to sit around the tables with the Australias and the Britons and the Canadas and the Indias and the South Africas and the Nigerias, and still, as one country with one voice, really make a difference. And one other point I'll make on this is that, again, in terms of the current debate about climate change, 2 years before the Rio summit that started to deal with climate issues, the Commonwealth had already taken a position on environmental and sustainable development. And so we are recognizing that the Commonwealth on environmental issues, small states issues, bigger human rights issues, has been a global leader. And I think it still has an important role to contribute going forward.
Make sure you stay tuned because we're back right after the break.